Say, I got this question from a listener the other day. Andrew writes in and says, Todd, this happens to me all the time. My team comes to me to have me solve all of their problems. What can I do? Well, we'll talk about the solution to that, Andrew, on today's episode of the PivotPreneur podcast. Let's pivot.
Here we go. Pivot. Pivot. Pivot.
Well, hello, everybody. I am Todd Stocker, your PivotPreneur host and coach, and this podcast is dedicated to answering your questions about life, leadership, and the pursuit of change. Hey, just a quick special welcome to the participants from the Best Practices for Ministry conference I was at a week ago or so. It just seems like forever ago. It's great to have you on and joining today. We are not doing a YouTube video. We'll have YouTube up in a little bit. Have some technical difficulties this morning as we're doing the production of the podcast, but it'll be up there on YouTube pretty quick for those of you who like to watch on YouTube. But again, it is great to welcome the participants of my session from Best Practices for Ministry. So we're going to talk about what Andrew wrote in, and if you have a question about your leadership or life or how to make some changes that make big changes in your life, just go to PivotPreneur.com or just send a note through YouTube or directly to me at ToddStalker.com, and hopefully we will get you on the podcast or the question like Andrew sent in. So let me read actually Andrew's longer question that he had for me because it provides a foundation for what we're going to talk about, and really the solution, Andrew, for you is that you should use the coach approach in your leadership. So here's what Andrew actually wrote, the full question he wrote in on PivotPreneur.com. Andrew says, Todd, this happens all the time. I'm in the middle of something that really needs my focus, but members of my team come to me to have me solve all their problems. Since I'm busy, I usually just need to answer their question and solve their problem so I can get back to whatever I was doing. It seems like it's gotten to a point where they can't decide where to eat lunch without me making that decision as well. It's driving me crazy. What can I do? Oh, Andrew, I completely understand your situation, and I'll share my story in a little bit. But again, the quick answer for you that we're going to dissect a little bit is you need to use a coach approach in your leadership. Now, a lot of us have, and in fact, when we did the Best Practices for Ministry session, the breakout session workshop that I did, that most of that presentation, or a big chunk of it, is really defining what a coach is, which we'll do in a little bit too. But Andrew, you know, and those listening on the podcast, you know that most of your team, if you lead a staff, or even if you lead your family, most on your team are capable of making many decisions, right? But now it sounds like, Andrew, you've become the problem solver. Like they just don't feel fulfilled unless you speak into the situation. And the problem with that, I mean, there's positives of that as a leader, obviously, as you know, but the problem is that you then become so overwhelmed, and then they don't know where the parameters are where they can make a decision. And the deeper problem is really this, Andrew. It's not about what you're doing, but what you've created in the team, and it shows through how they are dependent on you. You're basically enabling them, if you will, to come to you for this decision. The deeper problem, Andrew, is your job as a leader is to equip your staff to do what needs to be done in their department, in their ministry, in their whatever aspect that they're involved in. So the solution is, and I'm a firm believer in this, is a different mindset of what leadership is when you're dealing with your staff, especially when they're asking you about questions. But the solution is really a coach approach to leadership. Andrew, they've learned to be dependent on you. Every conversation that you have should be, the initial starting place in your mind should be as a coach. Okay, so that when you initialize or when you come into a conversation with the mindset of being a coach, it really changes not only you, it actually relaxes you. Brain science and some of the studies show that when you take on a coach approach, you actually become relaxed because you're curious about what they're saying, and you are sitting back and relaxing to be a good listener. So let me tell you quickly what the differences are and what a coach approach is. So those of you from Best Practices, you probably will recognize this, know this. But there's a difference between a coach, a counselor, a mentor, a consultant, somebody who's a discipler, if you will. So a counselor basically is taking a look at a person's problem and helping them come from negative up to zero. Now, if zero is a normal situation, if you feel that's the normalcy, people that need counseling are on the negative side of being normal, if you will. So people with addictions, people with some really serious abuse situations, or even just people who have a struggle in their life. That's where a counselor is awesome. Because a counselor can provide homework and help the person come from a negative situation up to zero. So a mentor or a consultant, you could actually throw a discipler, this is discipling in here too, looks at an issue or a problem and helps take a person from zero to moving forward or solving a problem that isn't a counselor type problem. So, but what a mentor and consultant does is they actually bring in, because I'm a consultant for organizations on all kinds of different levels, and what we do is we listen to the person or the organization, and we kind of pick out here the good things that we do a SWOT analysis. Here's the good things that are happening. Here's some weaknesses. Here's some opportunities, and here's some threats to that opportunity to move forward. But then we bring in outside models. Hey, there's a church or there's a business that is similar to yours that is actually doing this. So we're actually throwing in ideas, and we're giving them solutions, which is really, really good and really, really helpful. However, in a staff situation, you become kind of a library of ideas for them. So the difference. So again, a counselor brings somebody from a negative situation up to zero. A mentor/consultant or being in a discipleship situation takes the person then and throws in ideas and ultimately says, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. A coach is convinced that the person somewhat already knows what to do, or somewhere inside of their soul or their mindset, the answer is the next best step for them is inside them already. And the job of a coach is simply to ask some probing questions, some really good questions to help bring out that idea. And so, for example, when I was at an organization, a nonprofit church, I had a wonderful staff. I mean, they were top-notch staff. Most could make decisions. Most were highly trained. But I found myself where you were, Andrew. I kept answering questions about what kind of cookies we should have at youth, what should, all these different little tiny things, not that deep, but they kept coming into my office, and I have an open door policy unless I'm actually meeting with somebody. My door is always open in my office. But they kept coming into my office saying, hey, we really need your insight on this. What should we do? In staff meetings, everybody would look to me to make the decisions. But then I discovered and developed the coach approach, which is simply not being the first one to talk about the issue or even offer solutions. I was usually, and I'm usually the last one to say, hey, let me throw this idea on the table. Okay? So a coach approach simply says, or simply has this mindset that I'm looking at the person who's looking at the problem. I'm not necessarily looking at the problem that they're dealing with. I'm looking at the person. So in real life, let's say a person comes to me and they're struggling with their spouse on some level. I don't really care about their spouse. I mean, I do, you know what I'm saying, but I'm looking at the person who's dealing with the problem. I'm not coaching the problem. I'm not coaching their spouse. I'm coaching them. I think the book, The Coach's Mindset, I can't remember which book it was, but there's a paragraph in there that I used at Best Practices, if you remember, for those of you who were there. But it basically says, I'm curious as to how they're going to get out of this situation, or I'm curious how they are going to solve the problem. My role as a leader is to guide them, coach them into finding the next best step for them. To me, it might not be the best step. That's really important. I might have the perfect idea, and it might not be the next best step. Actually, I had this happen just the other day. I was listening to, or we were in our staff meeting, and we do presentations every week and throughout the week, and we were talking about the fonts and the background to the presentation, and I slipped into saying, well, I don't like this, or I think we should do this, rather than just stepping back and allowing the team decide what would be good. They're capable, wonderful people and have the best in mind for the organization. But I threw out my ideas, and then I caught myself going, wait a second, coach approach. Because it really, to me, honestly, it really doesn't matter as long as the message comes through clearly. So the coach approach is the best way to enter into the conversation and keep coming back to. Because realistically, in some situations with your staff and your team, you do have to be the mentor. You do have to disciple. There are times when you actually do have to make decisions. And a couple of those times would be when the person doesn't have all the vital information. So I coached a group of people right out of training for about 8 months. And they had come from training. They had no world experience in their nonprofits and how to lead people and deal with the ups and downs of what it means to lead a staff, especially some of the guys who were really, really young. And so I actually took a coach approach initially, but realized pretty quickly they have no idea. They've never experienced some of the things that I've experienced in 25 years in church work and ministry. So I had to start with the coach approach, but then also do some teaching and training with them, just simply because they did not have the information. So that's one way I make a decision. The other times I make a decision is when my team is going down a road that doesn't serve our vision. Now, mostly in all of my leadership, I can't even remember when that happened. The closest thing would be this: as a church pastor, our focus, or at least my heart, is to try and help people, try and reach as many people as we could that doesn't know the love and grace in Jesus Christ. Okay. So many of the conversations we were having organizationally were not serving that idea or that vision. A lot of it was just serving the people within the church. And that's okay. Okay, that's okay. But that's not what we are called to do as church workers or people in the ministry. And again, I recognize I have a big chunk of people that you guys aren't church people. You're not working in a church. And it's a very interesting bag, that's for sure. But when my teams in the past were really, I wanted to redirect them into, wait, this is why we're here. This is why God's put us in our neighborhood, is to reach people and share the message of hope and love, okay? But most of the time in my leadership now, actually it's been about 15 years, but most of the time I'm the last one to talk. If my team in a staff meeting, for example, is throwing out ideas about what to do next, and hey, maybe we should do this, how about this, let's add this, most of the time I'm the last one to talk as the leader. And I say something like, hey, let me throw something on the table for us to consider. And I throw it out there. And then we as a team discuss it And ultimately, there are times where I have to go, okay, with all of this being said, why don't we go ahead and do this? And then the team, then we do whatever it was we said. Again, I can't think of a time when I'm actually just coming in and storming in and saying, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. So if you're like that as a leader, take a step back. And again, each situation is different. But I get some people that say, well, I'm paid to make decisions. And I push back. As a leader, you're not paid to make decisions. You're paid to get results from decisions. Let me say that again. You're not paid to make decisions. You're paid to get results from decisions. Does that make sense? Boy, that's a podcast in and of itself. Maybe I'll redirect that and do that one as a full podcast. But so anyway, having that coach approach, Andrew, and everybody listening, just really thinking, being curious about how your staff member is going to solve this problem or go to the next level is the best mindset to have. The coach approach. And the result that I've found in a lot of people that I'm coaching and people really taking this on seriously is their staff is empowered to make decisions within their department or area or event. Okay, policy-based governance is a great way to operate a lot of nonprofits. It's not the greatest for churches for a couple of reasons, but it is a good way to start because the staff then has a parameter within they can make a decision. Maybe it's a budget parameter, maybe it's a timeline parameter. They can make decisions without having to go all the way up to the board or all the way even to you, but they can make a decision within that area. So they're freed up to make decisions. I'm freed up because they know the parameters within. They can make those decisions. And now I absolutely love to come into conversations when there's a problem. Because again, I'm more of an observer to the problem. Again, I do solve some things and throw things on the table, but I absolutely love seeing my staff make their own decisions and decisions that generally, actually a lot of times, are better than what I would have picked. So a couple of to-dos, Andrew, and everybody listening. In Hamilton, I don't remember the two characters. Hamilton's one. Maybe it's Burr, I think is the other one. But there's a song where Burr says to Hamilton, talk less, smile more. I think that's actually a really good coaching phrase. Talk less, smile more. But seriously, identify what you absolutely have to make a decision about. Maybe you're the stop point for budget, for preaching ideas, for teaching ideas, the direction of your department or organization or company. Identify what you absolutely have to make a decision about, and then everything else, keep that coach approach going on. Even to be collaborative in your decisions that you have to make as well, but keep the coach approach as the top way that you come into a conversation. Well, hopefully, Andrew, that has been helpful. Again, it's been great. Welcome the best practices for ministry. I'd encourage everybody to sign up to subscribe to the podcast, or if you go to YouTube, we'll get a YouTube something for YouTube once all of my technical things glitches get fixed. We'll get something up on YouTube, but love to have you subscribe and so you can get these consistently. If you are new to the podcast, every 5th episode we do an interview with somebody who has made a pivot in their life, made some changes in their life. The last one we had Marnie, who moved from America down to Roatan and is a full-time expat now. So listen to that one. I think that was episode 30. And then we also, coming up, we have somebody who made a health decision and dropped a whole bunch of weight, got healthy, and is now actually coaching people on their own personal health. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's episode 35. So again, you all are why I do this podcast. I want to add value to your life. That's my personal part of my personal mission statement. So hopefully I'm doing that here for you. And here's what you need to do. Go to PivotPreneur.com. It has all the links for the podcast. It has a little article that syncs up with the podcast itself. Ask a question about how to make a pivot in your work or your life, and potentially I'll use that on the show. Thanks again. Remember, if you discover, develop, and deploy your purpose, you too can become a PivotPreneur and find work and a life that you love. Make it a great day.